Good morning. I hope everyone is keeping well today. Welcome to this webinar, Diversity, Digital, and Data, the three keys to innovation. So my name is Loïc Lemarois, and I'm a marketing manager at Headspring, and today I will be your host. So this webinar is intended to be interactive. The main goal is that we want to hear from you. So please do send in your comments, your questions. There's a small question box on the side of your screen here. Please make sure to use that. We'll have a Q&A session at the end. So today, I would like to introduce Lindsay Jones, who is an executive editor at the Financial Times, and Balvinder Power, who is a Headspring educator. He is an IE professor and a business mentor. They are both co-author of the forthcoming book, Going Digital, What It Takes to Make a Change. The book will be published next year by Pearson and by FT Publishing. As well, I would like to let you know today that the format of the webinar is going to be slightly different. Mainly, it's going to be a conversation between Lindsay Jones and Balvinder, so it's not going to be a presentation. Hi, Lindsay. Hi, Bal. How are you today?
Hi, good stuff. Happy to be with everyone.
So what we're going to do, we're going to start straight away with a cloud word. So I'd like you all to actually access Slido. So I'm going to put that on right now. So join in with slido.com, and then you need to put the hashtag HS and then DDD. And then if you could actually answer that word cloud, that would be great.
So this is a really key question, isn't it, Bal? Sum up what digital transformation means to you, and it's something that we're going to be discussing, and we'd really like to know what the audience thinks of it first to get it underway.
And also, it's a very broad question, but even the same answer underneath can mean different things for each person, depending on their role and their organization and the purpose of what they're doing. So please add your comments. The word cloud will emerge in front of us, and then we have a starting point.
I can see there's already one person that replied.
Yes.
Success.
Yeah, I mean, Bal, is there a word that springs to mind for you? I think one for me might be acceleration.
Acceleration. And my big one, as you know, is culture. So for me, the tools are secondary. First, you have to think about how do we fit together as people, human-led innovation. Because if we don't understand why we're using it, what are we going to do?
Exactly. I can see there's one word there already, just success, which I think is very true, actually. You, on your path to digital transformation, you do want to succeed. And we're going to be hopefully giving you some tips about how to do that, how to do it successfully.
And look, some more words: future-proof, survival. It's on the other end of the scale, yes?
Survival is very, very true right now, I think. So many businesses are just trying to survive. And it's true, isn't it? How fast they pivot to digitalization is going to be key to their survival.
And the words evolution or maybe exponential, things are going incredibly fast. What was new 10 years ago, you know, it lasts like just a year now. So the cycle of change is much faster. Okay, we are using things today that were just introduced maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So it's much faster than before. I like the word rebalance because it also affects the way we live. So COVID, in a bad situation, we have the opportunity to make a type of reset, but we have to decide what does that look like and how do we achieve a success through that.
I must admit,
Lindsay, what are the words?
Chaos there. I like the word chaos there because I think sometimes that gets glossed over, doesn't it? That actually digital transformation can feel chaotic, particularly if you're at the coalface trying to deliver that. And that's what we're going to be talking about a bit today as well, that we've spoken to quite a few managers who've had to deliver change, and for them it can really feel quite chaotic at times.
I also think it's about being honest and humble, because everybody is very cool about digital, but some people are lost and we don't want to lose people. So be honest about what it means for you and the challenges. And as Lindsay said in our book, we're looking at the manager on the inside who's less known about how they really make the change happen at the coalface. So great. Experiments, yes. Big ones, small ones, what's better? We have to find a way to try things out. Fear, wow. Nice.
Yeah.
Lindsay, any last comments on that one?
On fear, I think fear's
Or
a big
whatever
thing.
word you want.
Whatever word, I think evolution, that's definitely something that happens at the FT in terms of the newsroom. It's evolutionary change. We're into evolution, not revolution. And that is, we found that that's key to survival for us, that we've been successful at that in terms of our digital transformation. So yeah, we can talk more about that during this webinar. Val, any final comments from you?
I think that's good. It's great to get those words. They're very contrasting. They also mean different things to different people, but we're looking at the optimistic side and also the cautious side, and it's a bit of all of that. We have to find our way forward in a messy situation, but there is a lot of opportunity. So what we're going to do now, we're going to get to the 3 points. We're going to start with the first point. We have an opening quote, and then we have the key points we're going to discuss. As Loke said, this is a different format, so we have prepared this, but a lot of this is going to come very organically because we want to have a type of conversation, okay? We will be looking at the time, so we'll be covering maximum around 13-15 minutes per topic, but hopefully to get you some valuable insights to start with. So let's start with diversity. And I think Loke will get to the first quote. So this is a quote that we found. We thought it was very, very relevant for now, from a very powerful person, ex-engineer, now CEO of Alphabet and Google, Sundar Pichai. He said, "A diverse mix of voices leads to better discussions, decisions, and outcomes for everybody." And in the survey from Cloverpop, it said inclusive teams make better business decisions, up to 87% of the time. And decisions made and executed by diverse teams delivered 60% better results. But that's the happy picture, but there's a lot behind the scenes. So what we're going to do now, we're going to look at the main points that we've considered key for you and to give you value, and we're going to discuss them, okay? So the first point, diversity can provide much better business results, but it has to be managed. Diversity, we talk about 7 levels. It's not about gender and race only. It's much broader. And in my experience with companies, it's been more about communication and working style, but it has to be managed. A diverse group of people, in whatever diversity means, if they're not well managed, it can be a disaster. So Lindsay, what can you tell us about that?
Well, at the FT, in terms of how we approach diversity initiatives, and I've spoken to a few people about best practice that we've done across the FT group, we started to look at the data in 2018, actually, in terms of the forms that people have to fill in about their background and ethnicity. And in 2018, only about 50% of the workforce were filling in these forms. Today, they've got it up to over 80%. Now, why is that important? It's because they had to find out the data first to understand the issues that the FT was facing in terms of its diversity and how it could improve and what initiatives they could plan to come up with. So to do that, they actually had to build trust around how do you get people to trust to hand over their data on this and to feel it isn't going to be used against them. And they've actually been very successful at that and got buy-in, and we've launched a number of diversity initiatives now right across the business, from employee networks to workshops around inclusivity and unconscious bias and so forth. And so far it's proving very successful.
So what we can see there, diversity has many nuances and there are many things behind the scenes. So we need the data to understand what diversity looks like. And there are many questions about it. For example, some writers say we should have equality of opportunity, but we cannot force the output because that's not natural. So we also have to think again in a more broader way and a systematic way about it for it to work, so that the results are the ones that we want. We can't push it too far, but we need the data. And I think in some cultures, they're much better about collecting that data, and they do this in a way that's a lot more structured. And as I said there, you know, this is not just about race and gender. Diversity is very broad. It's also about how different types of teams work together, and that can be an opportunity, but a massive challenge. We have a recent example that we discussed around space mining. I think Lindsay can give us a little bit of insight.
Yeah, again, this is like the interviewees for our book. The space mining company was very interesting because actually for them, they had a diverse workforce from people from worldwide, many countries coming together. But actually what their real problem was is that they had engineers coming together with the mining industry. And the two different approaches there, the two different cultures, was actually a real culture clash, which they had to somehow navigate. What they learned through that process, which I believe was quite difficult at times, was actually to have humility and to unlearn old habits and relearn again. And I think this is a theme actually about unlearning old habits to do with culture change and so forth that has come up. It's come up at a little bit at the FT as well in terms of their diversity initiatives at times. And what do you think about that, Bal? How can we unlearn things?
Yeah, we have to unlearn, and that humility and openness is there. So the space mining thing is a very good example, because normally we think, I've been very connected to aerospace. It's a high-tech, highly educated industry, and then we go to mining. But for them to work together, they have to come with a very open mindset to learn from each other, because they're trying to do something new together. So I think it's that spirit of wanting to learn and being open, but you will not do it if there's not a benefit for you. So we have to be very clear. We have to identify the benefit for you to have the buy-in to do it. If not, it can become a very sterile exercise. But what we know, that diversity is going to be more important as more and more industries intermingle, so we could find strange partners are coming together to create value, because everything has changed. I remember, you know, I was working with a pharma company, and I asked them last year, who is your main competitor? And they actually said Amazon is our main competitor in the US regarding distribution of over-the-counter drugs. Now, that is a very surprising answer that would not have existed 10 years ago. So now it's the opportunity. We have to make more diverse players come together to find better answers in a world that's changing very quickly. Yeah.
And this isn't
Now,
always easy, is
go
it?
ahead, Lindsay.
Because it's not always easy, is it? Because actually, some companies have already experienced a backlash over their diversity initiatives, such as Estée Lauder earlier in the summer, where they were criticised for hypocrisy over their skin lightening creams, while coming out in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. And since then, they've had to look at the language and marketing of their material around the creams. So there are issues around this as well, and you can see there on our slide that there's a McKinsey report where 27% of global diversity and inclusivity leaders have initiatives on hold through the pandemic. So there is a more tricky side to this, shall we say, as well, in terms of delivery.
And I think people are very sensitive now because we're thinking a lot about impact. We're hurt financially in many ways, but a younger generation is very concerned about sustainability and impact. So there's a word I use a lot, is about being holistic. So the example of Estée Lauder is very clear. You cannot do something and not expect to have a reaction, because we're looking at how companies behave and if they make our life better and if they respect us. And those are the companies we want to be more aligned to. So for bigger corporations, sometimes that's difficult because they have a lot of silos and their different departments are not talking to each other. So we've got to look at it in a different way. I would say a big opportunity you have, if you look at point 3, is that now location is not becoming so important. I have a lot of cases of students I work with and professionals. Their companies have said, even though we're your employer and we're American, you can live where you like. So I live in Madrid, Spain. I found a lot of people coming to live in Madrid, Spain because of lifestyle, lower cost, but you have a foreign salary. So somehow this is also something we have to consider, and that affects the way people work. We shouldn't be working as individuals with our computer. We should be working in a distributed way, like a sort of neural network, because now hybrid and working remotely in different locations is here to stay. What do you think about that, Lindsay?
Well, actually, on the location stuff, I think that's really interesting, Bal, because it was about a year ago that I wrote an article around the future of work and spoke to some futurologists, we may know as futurists, and it was about what would work look like in 2050, so 30 years from now. And these guys were saying, oh, we're going to be remote working around the world, you're going to be on a beach and you'll just be signing on. And you're saying we're actually kind of there now, like a year later, so who knew? And what is actually throwing up as part of the issue around this is tax jurisdictions, actually, for companies and individuals. So yes, it all sounds great that you could be on the beach somewhere, or I'm going to fly to Spain and sign on there. Actually, so, as in log on to work, I mean, it could be problematic for tax reasons. But we are going to
there are these other details. Yeah, there's these other details that can affect us. And what I would say is, even though countries, because of the situation, becoming more protectionist, we cannot stop collaboration. And for that, you need a way to work, an internet connection, and a computer, and a willingness. So that's something will change. And what I found as well regarding diversity is that soft skills are becoming more important. Because even though many things are becoming automated, and we'll talk a bit about that later, there are certain human skills that machines cannot do. And that's talking about creativity, that's talking about ethics, things like regulations, and also empathy. And we know that a diverse group of people, as Sundar said, give us many views, and that can help us to be creative if it's well managed. Now we have a couple of minutes left about this section. I'd like some more gold from Lindsay.
Oh, right. So I think you can see the final point there about you need transparency around your metrics in order to really help your diversity initiatives succeed. And this is really around pay gaps and so forth. So salaries, promotions, bonuses, opportunities to achieve diversity. And actually we found that data is behind this. Data is vital for your accountability and to be transparent around that. And these are issues that I think the companies will have to grapple with to take diversity seriously and forward and succeed with it.
Perfect. I think that's a great endpoint for this section. And remember, we're trying to give you starting points, thinking points, things to digest and consider for you to just afterwards formulate questions for us. So I think, Loic, we can get to the next point that we see is key to innovation. Now, remember, we are talking about 3 points. In our book, we talk about more points about it, but it's a bit of a teaser, a bit of a taster of this. So another one, we're talking here about digital. So diversity, digital data. Now, this is a quote that we found that we loved, and we actually found it quite humorous. We went from being the Flintstones to the Jetsons in 9 months, okay? So it's about a metaphor of the speed of innovation and the need for digital transformation that has swept us over the last few years. And as we said before, the cycles are much faster. You know, what was new yesterday is old 1 year later, when before technology could be with us for maybe a cycle of 10 years or more. So let's get into the points.
I actually love that quote because I can totally identify with it, because I was a practitioner of digital transformation in the FT newsroom. I've overseen a number of global transformational projects there, and that's exactly how it felt. Although I can imagine. I think each project took about 2 years from conception to delivery to successfully say that you had transformed a part of the newsroom.
And I think it's very interesting to start with is that the case study of FT is an amazing one, where it's an organization that said that they were digital first. And it's a case study of how to manage that well. Can you give us a little bit of insight there, Lindsay?
Well, how to manage that well. What was really key was persuasion and influence, to get the buy-in from your colleagues, to get them to change habits or learn new software when they're very busy and feel overloaded perhaps and can't take on, or their perception is they're taking on a new thing to learn. So I did have to employ a number of underhand tactics, shall we say, and pretend I had a secret project and pick off a couple of people that I thought would be change champions who might help me deliver a particular project, and told them to keep it secret and not tell anybody. Well, of course, if you say secret to a journalist, that's probably the key word, because the very next day I then had the department heads of their teams queuing up at my desk demanding to be involved in the secret project, and that's how I got buy-in in one particular way, which was quite funny but successful. So but generally the FT has been fantastic at digital change in the time that I've been there. I've seen it move from a legacy print organisation to a digital first, or even what is being described as digital only in the newsroom now, in a number of years. And we've also become making our revenue in a majority, the majority of our revenue is made from digital subscriptions these days, which is an amazing transformation that we have gone through.
Perfect. And you know, there I mentioned again about culture and being holistic, and there's an interesting thing I found out in management theory and working with companies. So a lot of the time, if digital and innovation goes together, they're not the same, but they're together. Maybe digital is underneath innovation and a part of it, but with one very big bank, what we found out is that they wanted people to innovate and adopt digital methods, but they were compensating people due to the financial performance of the company. So people didn't mind about innovation because they said, if I get the same compensation, why should I bother? So they realized talking about it wasn't enough. They had to give them a hard incentive. So what they did, they actually developed a peer system where people would give each other stars based on behaviors that can help innovation and digital actually become part of the ethos and the heart of the company. So when, for people, part of their financial bonus was tied with behaviors that can help innovation to happen, that actually made it happen. So somehow that gets to that point at the end saying the culture cannot be the same, because people are very resistant to change. You've got to reward them some way and not just in a soft way. Otherwise, it's unlikely that they're going to do it. So there has to be a win for everybody. Otherwise, this just is an idea and not a reality. And you don't want to use fear. You want to use motivation, internal motivation, so that people give that extra and they think, why are we doing this? I mean, what would you say about that, Lindsay?
Well, I think there are times when, you know, I think I really did want to use fear, but I knew I couldn't. But what the other things I would say about this, where we have interviewed other people that have been going through digital change, two other media companies actually, and both quite interesting, because one media company actually really planned their transformation, and they put out a big statement from their CEO saying this is what they were going to do. And just by having that statement alone, they started to get buy-in from the staff, and people were keen to get on board. And they also rolled out a training program at the same time, and set up a management support forum for all the managers at the coalface having to deliver this transformation. And all those things together made it actually a successful project. And when we're talking about project, we are talking about a 2-year time frame. So from when they originally sent out their statement from the CEO to actually the completion where they could say they've delivered digital change. And those were the kinds of steps that that particular company took. At another company that I spoke to, a media company again, that was going through digital change, they chose not to plan. They decided it was evolutionary and we'll just do it. And in their words, it caused chaos. Okay. Which I think actually goes back to that word cloud. Somebody put in chaos. It was chaos at this place, probably for around 9 months to a year before they decided they didn't want to go and work in the chaos anymore, and they actually had to go back and start planning. So I think planning is really quite key.
Planning is good because you can mitigate risk, but I would say if we talk about innovation digital and you're doing it for the first time, you're going into the unknown. So I would recommend that we plan, but then we have constant milestones where we're checking how the results are. We're making it smart, and then we can adapt, because we do need an element of being organic. Now, we can't have an end game and expect to get there. Sometimes the results, and in the book we talk about that, are surprising. So there's a point there in number 5 about allowing us to experiment. So a lot of the time for legacy firm especially, you're not allowed to fail. But if you're not allowed to fail and you don't have a culture where you can try things out and nothing bad happens, how are you going to innovate? So with one company we worked with in Spain, actually an insurer, we actually created a place of open innovation where we connected startups with people from the company. Now, what they wanted startups that would give them a lot of revenue in a short space of time. That didn't work. But what did work is the culture of the company changed. So the employees became more open to thinking like entrepreneurs. That message got out to the public, and that insurance company had more traction with the young talent that they needed. Because if you think about it, banks and insurers are fintechs. They become software companies. That explains the amazing success of N26 and Revolut in Europe. If you are a software company and you don't have that young techie talent to join you, you're going to die. So another thing we have to think about, and that goes to diversity in culture, we have to create a culture where we're allowed to fail. And then we have to think, do we do it little by little, or do we take a big jump? Maybe what we can do is we leave a part of our resources to experiment that doesn't affect our main business. Lindsay, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I spoke to somebody in the US about this, about micropod. They called it micropods. You can call it innovation hubs. And they're seeing this as a vital step within a big business, within a big corporation, to try and adapt the way startups might approach experimenting or coming up with new products. And it is collaboration across the corporation. So it's bringing in talent from different departments to work together in a small pod where they can be allowed to experiment. And you may get failures in that, and to actually accept that. Obviously, that there's situations where the failure is not hitting the bottom line. That's important to stress, that the revenue is not at stake there, because that's a question that often comes up actually. But it's the approach that some corporations are beginning to roll out.
And digital is key, but not everything is digital, so we have to be mindful. So I go back to human-led innovation and what we are doing digital for. And there are many layers to that. Is it our end product? Is it about being more efficient on the inside? What does that look like? So it's a massive topic around innovation. There's a lot of hires happening about digital innovation and the type of profiles. But I think we have to think, why are we doing something? We have to have a plan, but we have to be flexible to adapt, because we are getting into a type of unknown. So Lindsay, is there anything else before we go to the next topic?
Yeah, I think I would just very briefly, we probably haven't really touched on this, but it's just one thing to bear in mind with all this change, with the acceleration, with the fast pace, is actually to look after your staff, look after the talent, because before the pandemic, this was always a risk of burnout and exhaustion with delivering transformation projects. And now with the pandemic on top, I think people are finding it quite an exhausting process to be going through all the time.
I think that's a good point about well-being and balance. We are with the screen a lot of time. Many people are optimistic about what's going to happen in COVID. Other people are anxious. So as we go digital, it also means we're working differently, but be mindful about people's health and maybe even their mental health, where a part of well-being is being together. So I think that balance is important. And I think maybe technology can help us so that people work to their strengths. It's not about being a production line. Some people work better at some time of day. Some people have a different working style. Maybe also digital is not just about the product or service, but it's the way we work to optimize and individualize performance that is not a production line. People work when they want and how they work best, and then you bring it together. So let's get to the third topic, which is data. And I think here Lindsay is going to open up with the quote.
So this is
So
a
look, yeah.
great quote here that we liked. The goal is to turn data into information and information into insight, and that data helps us to make better decisions and formulate better strategies. I think I agree with that. Val, what do you make of it?
I think it's important because data not for its sake, what then it means that it's not just about collecting the data, it's about using that data strategically. And even as we mentioned in the next slide, which we'll see, is about how data today, and I think we know this as well, becomes revenue. It becomes another revenue stream. Okay. So let's go to the points. Yeah.
So
I think
in the newsroom anyway, we certainly use data analytics, and this is something that's fairly new. Say about 5 years or so ago, we didn't have it in the newsroom. We didn't have audience engagement teams or analytical data analytical teams in the newsroom, and we do now. So that was again a transformation of the newsroom. And how did we go about introducing that? And I spoke to somebody who was quite key again at the coalface of coming into the newsroom and having to actually develop a tool that journalists would use and find useful to help them with their news stories. And this person told me that they turned up and they were quite young and they thought they knew everything and they were just going to tell everybody what to do, and everybody would go off and do it because, you know, they were just so marvelous. And of course, none of that happened whatsoever. There are big arguments, and this data analytical person found out they actually had to collaborate, work together, and actually come up with a solution that worked for everybody on a consensus-driven basis. And again, that took a couple of years, but to develop and work through. And they actually did develop a very good analytical tool, which we get a lot of information from in terms of where audiences are around the globe, how long they read a story for, how much time they spend on page, and how many people read the story. And we didn't have any of that information 5 years ago. And now this is a vital tool that we use daily, and it helps drive decisions or gives information for us to make decisions around. But it was quite a journey to get there.
And if we look at it, you know, we put the word critical because it is critical. So there's the good stories, but they're the bad ones. So think about a recent example from Facebook. Now, the younger generation of under 25s, they're on Instagram and TikTok. They don't even want to be on Facebook because they're worried about the use of their data. So they don't trust that company anymore. So that's where data can become critical. On the other hand, what I've noticed in the business school, we have very successfully at IE Business School launched master's programs about big data and cybersecurity. Now, these are roles which are very much, we could say, in the kitchen beforehand. They were roles that were behind the scenes. They were not very visible. But now you have standalone departments about data and cybersecurity, which are strategic for the companies. So now this is a very, very important role that's on the front line, when before it used to be behind the scenes. And that is only going to increase over the future. Now, it's also revenue. We know that if you have certain data with people's permission, that can help you can sell that data, but also it can also help you to, as Lindsay said, optimize thinking about the content you use. So if I can know how much time people spend on a certain article, or what's the qualitative response, I can adjust what I'm doing to attract more audience, a different audience, and I can really personalize what I'm offering, and even maybe offer something slightly different to different publics. What do you think about that, Lindsay? Because I think the FT case is very interesting regarding that.
Yeah, no, certainly that's the path they're going down. It's becoming very fragmented audience, a disrupted audience worldwide. And yeah, we're trying to really tailor make content for specific audiences, albeit it could be a newsletter as much as a story online or a podcast. There are many different audiences that we're going after now, and we also have to be have an eye on what competitors are doing. And our competitors may not just be the New York Times, but it could be YouTube or a video game, for example. So there are many distractions now, and so you do have to be very targeted around what your niche is and what your unique selling point is. And hopefully for us, it's smart content. So one point I want to make, and I probably should have made this throughout, is how key training is actually in all these points, key for diversity, digitalization, and also use of data, whether it's your tech skills or actually how you're going to deliver change. Because there was one theme that really came out of the people that we've talked to so far, which is the managers who are at the coalface are often just dropped into these situations where they haven't had any training and they're just sort of expected to get on and deliver it, which is a challenge, should we say. Although they did all rise to the challenge in their own ways. So I don't know what you make of that, Bal.
Yeah. And I think, these points are standalone, but they're very connected when you talk about diversity, digital, and data. And there's something I'm finding there, you said about the training, more and more, even in the MBA, which is very broad, it's not specific masters on cybersecurity or data, we're finding we're introducing data parts. Now, why is that? Because it actually affects diversity. Now, before, this was really a behind the scenes type of activity, but now you can have a chief data officer who is a C-level at the same level of the CFO of the company. So you have a more young techie profile who might be in the late 20s at the same level with somebody who's maybe in their 50s, and that creates a type of imbalance. So it's more about what you do and not your age and your experience. So this changes how companies work together. So we have to be more collaborative. It does affect the diversity as well. And we know that data is affecting everything. I like sport, and I find it's incredible the use of data, how they use data to put a value on a player, and how players can actually think about the match, thinking about the statistics. Because one thing is what you think and feel, one thing is what the data tells you, and you can leverage that to be more precise in your response. So we need different stakeholders to come together to solve the problems. And data is something very objective. Sometimes it's a bit shocking because it can surprise you and people are shocked by the truth. But it's better to know what you need to know, not what you want to hear. And to finish this part, I'd like to ask Lindsay, has there been any surprising things that you've discovered when you've had a more data-driven approach to your business?
That's quite a tough one there, Bal. Well, what I was thinking though, while you were talking around the data and how you can leverage it from a journalistic perspective, and this is a change, and I guess this is in a way a surprise. I didn't really think about it, but it's actually your personal brand, and this applies to everybody. It doesn't actually matter what line of work you're in, but if I take journalists, Now, how many followers you have online in all your social media, you're becoming a brand. So the bigger followings you have, the more leverage you have, and the more value you have as an individual in a way that it wasn't there even maybe 10 years ago. And when I've done the Future of Work articles, the experts, the futurologists, actually mention this as a thing for everyone, whatever line of work you're in, that you will have to leverage your personal brand, and data is behind it. And that's why it's important for everybody actually to get to grips with and start thinking about how you can market yourself and what your audiences are for your line of work. And that may only be 50 people, but those 50 people might pay you for whatever it is that you're marketing. That's why I think it's important.
And I would say, to close this point, it's very important. And even we've seen, and this is an incredible change, the use of data in political campaigns. We've seen the impact of that in an incredible way, and the relationship between countries where data is actually being driven from one place to use in another location, especially in the campaign of politicians, how they leverage data and social media. So it's an incredibly powerful thing which can produce incredible results. So if you're not aware of it and you don't know how to leverage it, you're losing something, or maybe even an opportunity. Okay. Now, what we'd like to do now, these are just, kickoff points and thinking points. We go into much more detail in our book that we want to publish next year, but we want to give you some things to consider and think about, and we will even share the presentation with you afterwards. But what we'd like now is you to ask any questions that you have about diversity, digital data, or anything else that you'd like to discuss. And we will have these questions fielded by Log. And if not, we can also have a little conversation based on going deeper into some areas. So please welcome to ask questions. Log, we're happy to receive them. Again, thank you, Lindsay. A very lively debate in a new way of doing things.
Yeah. Hopefully the audience have enjoyed it.
Hopefully.
No, thank you very much for the session. I think it was very, very interesting. Actually, I have a question personally. I mean, many companies in the pandemic had to transform digitally pretty much overnight. And I'm sure some of them potentially failed because they were rushed into actually transforming digitally overnight. If you're in a situation that you're going through failure, how can you rebound, especially in the pandemic world?
So I'll jump, if I could jump straight in on that one, because I've actually written an article that's going to come out soon around digital trends during the pandemic, and people that I interviewed for it, the ones who are surviving were the ones who could pivot to digitalization as fast as possible, whatever their business was. And it's because they had digital expertise of some sort or other. They already had the knowledge. They were already working on one of these trends. And so we're able to pivot extremely rapidly and accelerate their plans. Those that haven't accelerated their plans or struggled in some way, I think Marks and Spencer, for example, were given as an example that have struggled to move quickly enough with their online retail, and so fell behind rivals in that situation. Or others like Kodak were, we often know it's the Kodak moment where they got left behind in the move to digital cameras, but Kodak recently were looking at moving into pharmaceuticals to use this sort of chemistry behind photography, I guess, to move into the pharma business. Now, it is around how you can use your skill set in your business to adapt rapidly, I would say. Val, I don't know what you think about that.
I would add to that to say it's all about the learnings. So I think a problem companies have is they go straight to the KPIs, And you need to know where you're going to, but you need to be able to adapt and pivot very quickly. And there's a big learning process. So I've read about and seen a lot of big processes. We're going digital, massive budget, and it's failed because they haven't applied the learnings as they go. So you need a bit of a Scrum mentality where you do very quick things, but you monitor the impact of that, whether you keep on going or you change direction. And it's interesting that there are other factors that are involved. Like Kodak is a great example. You know, Kodak actually had the first digital photography system, but because of their managerial and organizational setup, they didn't launch it to market because they thought it would cannibalize their traditional industry. So some of the things can be affected by the business strategy. But what I learned from that insurer, and they learned, the one in Spain, is that there can be unexpected income and outcomes that are actually of benefit to you. So you've got to keep your eye out and constantly monitor what's happening. And maybe you can release funds and resources based on the success. So maybe instead of thinking of one big change, you break it down into milestones, and every milestone is a success and a learning point, because it's still a big unknown. So I'd be very, very cautious, but at the same ambitious. So it's very subtle, and there's not one size fits all. I think that's why, you know, the idea of the book, because there isn't one size fits all. We have to really get into the context of the company, the culture, and what they want to achieve. Okay. I think that would be a bit of an.
You're right there, Bal, in terms of it's review and reassess, isn't it? And it's absolutely key that you do that at various stages of the transformation process that you're going through, even in this environment where things are really, really accelerating and it is about survival.
And I think now is a good time because maybe it's hard to execute stuff, but people are open to new ideas because nobody has an answer. So when we talked about this space mining company, the big change is that they decided they wanted to mine in space, but because they couldn't get the funding for that because it was too far away and they couldn't put a date on it, they actually started working with miners on Earth, applying this aeronautics technology. And that has actually saved the company, and they're thriving. So that ability to pivot and see new opportunities with unlikely partners can bring incredible results. So we need an openness, and maybe we need people in the company that have that type of connector view. They can connect the outside with the inside. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. That was quite insightful. So I have a question here. So it's on the last point about the data, sorry. So how can we validate data, especially in this pandemic situation, since using data with a validation might be at risk?
In what, can I sort of ask, how do you mean validate the data? Like within your own company, or are you talking about data that's supplied from elsewhere? Like, do we believe other people's data?
It's not like the person didn't really precise the question, but I mean, I think the question came up when we were talking about, you know, TikTok, Facebook. So I think it could be external data.
So maybe you can think about what is how do we know that the data is correct or real, or the veracity of the data? And maybe with and again, the FT example, how do you know that the data is reliable? Yeah, so does that mean the way you collect the data and you do it, does it mean you use external resources, internal? So maybe it's about the veracity.
We do have our data team, but if you're talking more generally about a news story where we're quoting a source of data, then it has to be from what we call a trusted source, I don't know, such as the World Bank or the United Nations or something like that. But yeah, it's tricky. It is tricky, isn't it? Because look at Cambridge Analytica, what happened there with their political data. That was a scandal. I think on this, I'm not a data expert, I'll say. I'm a journalist. So from a journalist perspective, we would check, and we check a lot at the FT. We check all our facts, and we check the numbers, and we go to trusted sources to do that. So that's how we check external data. But yeah, you do have to be cautious.
And when I work with startups, yeah, you have to be cautious. And when I work with startups, I say to them, don't rely on third-party data, get your own, because it looks very different when you get your own data and you learn new things. So it has to be specific to your purpose and your industry, and you have to see it for yourself. Because we know something written and academic in reality can change completely. So that's where part of the discovery is. That's why there's been the boon of open innovation. If we want to act like a startup as a legacy firm, we need to work with a startup. We can't pretend to be one because their dynamics are very different. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks. I have another question here. In your opinion, is digital just a trend or a necessity for all businesses today?
Or is it, sorry, I missed the last, is it a trend
or a necessity for all business today? So is it a trend, like, you know, is it a bubble, or do we actually need to transform digitally today?
Well, I don't mind jumping in.
I would say, yeah, jump in and then I'll continue.
Well, of
Please,
course, I'd
Lindsay.
say it's a necessity. You absolutely have to do it. I would say probably whatever line of business you're in. I mean, just look at the news business, how we've transformed from being a print operation. We still obviously have our print product, but we are mainly a digital operation now. And who would have known that maybe 20 years ago?
And I would say another company working with a charity in Spain, they actually provide products and services to the end consumer. So I think there are two things. First, think well and spend time thinking, what are you using digital for? Is it for providing a better service to your external client, or is it to improve the processes inside, or is it both? So we have to think of digital in different ways. It's not just one thing, and it isn't a fashion. And it's not a fashion because most people will find benefit from it if they consider why they're doing it. So think about the two questions. Is it about external process and clients and revenue, or is it about internal efficiencies, or is it both? And in a world that's getting automated, where we're avoiding physical contact, digital is just going to happen more and more, but it will give us a chance to be more human. As we said, there's certain things that are very human, but so much will be automated, and that's probably a good thing, but painful in the short term. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It will be painful in the short term, and as we've all seen, I mean, the pandemic is absolutely accelerating these trends. Which again, I agree, I don't think it's just a fashion. I think these trends were happening before the pandemic. They were just going to be a bit slower and more gradual. And as we've sort of touched on in our presentation with the Flintstones quote, where it was going to be nine months of change, you know, 2 years to deliver a transformational project. Do we still have 2 years to deliver the next one? I suspect not. You probably really do have to be quite fast in how you're adapting in your business, whatever line of work you're in, to this environment in order to survive.
And I would say, I give a personal example. Half my time I'm teaching, half my time I'm in my different business projects. But when the pandemic came in around March and April, most of my courses were face-to-face because they're about team building, leadership, behavior, soft skills. So I had a bit of a meltdown where I had to take 90% of my face-to-face courses to online, which is also digital. Now I'm finding the benefit of it and the flexibility, hoping that we'll go to a hybrid way. But in the beginning, it was very, very painful, but it has meant I've had to redesign everything I do regarding teaching. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be less effective, but I am hoping to get into a hybrid way of doing things where it'll be a bit more of a 50-50. But yes, digital is many things. Thanks to digital, we're here. Normally, we would have been in a venue and you come to see us. That's a different thing. And it now, as we understand digital better, it doesn't mean it has to be worse. It's just a different animal, we could say.
Okay.
Okay.
Great, thank you. I'm just conscious of a bit of time. So again, I mean, Lindsay, Balvinder, thank you very much for joining today. I found it very, very interesting. I hope as well the people that joined today found it very, very interesting. And yeah, I'd just like to reiterate what Balvinder said at the beginning. This is just a teaser of the book that Lindsay and Balvinder are co-writing, the co-authors. So the book is Going Digital: What It Takes to Be, what it takes to make the change. So it will actually be published next year by Pearson and FT Publishing. So watch the space. We'll be actually talking about it more on our website. So please do watch the space. Again, Lindsay, Balvinder, thank you very much for joining today. It's very interesting. And to everybody that joined, I hope you found it interesting as well. And hopefully we'll see you in the next session.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you,
Have a great
everyone.
day.
Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Lindsay. I think it went well. Good stuff.
Yeah, I'm
Excellent.
quite pleased with it. I'm not sure I want to watch it back, but there were a couple of things that threw me. I don't know if you realise that. I was thinking, oh, bloody hell. I hope I got the
No,
thing
but
right
it's
about
good.
Kodak and Marks and Sparks.